What's up, Barefoot Nation? Guys, I have a special video for you guys today. It is going to be the October 2019 garden tour. And what's cool about that is that 2019, this year, despite having such a roller coaster of a season with a cold spring and, all kinds of other challenges, this year, everything, as you can see behind me, especially the bananas, we'll get to them. So guys, let's have a look at the garden. I can't wait to show you what's going on. Let's go! I'm gonna start out behind the shed in the screening garden to check out a beautiful variety of miscanthus, also known as Japanese or Chinese silvergrass. This is a variety called Encore, and what's beautiful about it is that it starts blooming for me here in the Northeast in August, which is unusual. Normally miscanthus, it doesn't start blooming until September or October. So it's a pretty simple grass. It's got narrow gracilis type leaves. So it's got a pretty skinny leaf, but they are definitely noticeably thicker than a gracilis. Miscanthus is definitely going to want full sun, or at least mostly sun. They can take some shade, especially in hotter southern climates. Moving along this way from the Encore grass, you can see all of the beautiful elephant ears that I have in this garden. And this is just a typical Colocasia esculenta. It's not the Jack's Giant, it's not Thailand Giant, it's just the common form now, which of course I think these are just as beautiful as any elephant ear. Now these guys are smaller this year. Normally they're at least 5 or 6 feet tall. Well, they're certainly 5 feet tall, but this year they're a little bit smaller. So what I'm gonna do to remedy that for next year is once these guys get frosted, chopped down, and dug up, check out my video on how to grow taro to do that. Once that happens, I'm going to fork some manure into the ground, and granted that's going to be a composted manure, but it's not going to be fully composted. So moving along, I rarely show this tree and I don't know why. You can see this river birch here. That's this guy right here, and I don't know why I don't show this tree more often, because it's absolutely gorgeous. The coolest thing about river birch is if you have a wet spot and you don't want to grow willow and you want a fast growing tree, holy cow, guys. This thing has grown, it's got to be at least 10 feet in the 2 years that it's been in the ground. And I'll insert a picture so that you guys can see just how big it was when it was planted. An absolutely gorgeous tree. And of course, one of the features of the river birch is that the bark exfoliates and peels and has this cool, beautiful cinnamon colored camo type pattern that goes right up through the tree as it ages. So my hypothesis is that with river birch, every time it makes a new tree ring, you're gonna see another layer of bark peel out. And you can see that now the exfoliation goes way up into the canopy, but when you plant them, if you guys get them when they're small, you can see that it does not at all have that pattern, although you can see it starting to form right there. And while we're talking about trees, let me show you this absolutely beautiful eastern redbud. This was planted in 2015, and when that was planted, it was a tree that was they're about 7 or 8 feet tall. Now, despite the fact that redbuds are trees that generally like drier conditions, it has good drainage, but its roots are definitely able to get down into the wet zone in the garden, which is right where that river birch is. In very heavy rains, that whole area will pool up with water, but the redbud is not in the water, it's just near the water. Let's also just check out these winterberry hollies. Now, if you guys live in the eastern United States, this is a native plant for you, particularly in the Northeast. Now, what's amazing about these is this is a typical holly, which has typical holly berries, as you can see, but winterberry actually drops its leaves. And what's significant about that is you have these berries that are absolutely front and center in the dead of winter. And really they hold on for the most part until spring. Reason for that is these berries have a high starch content before it gets cold, and then post-thaw that starch turns to sugar. Instead of like the Japanese holly berries that make a mess on the ground, birds actually will eat these once the sugar content is correct. And that only happens after the freeze has subsided. And another cool usage for winterberry might be to make a hedge, as you can kind of see here. Now they haven't grown together just yet, but in time it will be a nice dense hedge. These plants are about 4 feet apart, and although they grow much wider, winterberry is not usually a very dense shrub, especially when grown in shade. So you can modify your spacing based on the site conditions. Now obviously you want to give shrubs at least 3 feet of space if you're going to do a hedge, but that's a different video. So as we move along, you can see this beautiful white bird of paradise, which is actually planted in the ground for the summer. The reason I plant this in the ground every few years is because white bird of paradise can be a very fast growing plant that has the potential to bust your pots open. You can see moving along from this, we're kind of going backwards towards the entryway of the garden. Now you can see another beautiful miscanthus, which the cultivar is fire dragon. I often mistakenly call it silver dragon for the silver color in the tassels, or the seed heads rather. So if we keep going along this way, you can see my Empress Wu hosta. Empress Wu is just one of those plants that is absolutely amazing. Just beautiful, huge, tropical almost leaves. And it's a hosta, so it's completely hardy, you know, in most areas where most tropical looking plants wouldn't grow. And it is a more shade loving plant. So if you picture the Musabastu leaves with this hosta, and how, especially earlier in the season, this hosta is a little bit darker and more of a bluish cast, it would be absolutely beautiful to have together. Maybe a useful technique would be something like a chop and drop, which is kind of like Jeff Lawton's term. Basically what chop and drop is making mulch from the plant. So you're taking your garden shears or a machete or something of the sort to cut this plant down and make an insulation, and what that also does is it conditions the soil perfectly to exactly what that hosta wants. So as we move away from Empress Wu, in the next garden bed, you can see that there are several interesting focal points. One of which is this clump of elephant ears. I'm not sure what variety it is. It was sold as pink china, but clearly it's not. It kind of has qualities like Fontanesi, but it doesn't quite have the stem color, and it's really an odd variety of taro, and it might be a species. I also have a little tropical storm tucked in there, and then you can see a real pink china also tucked into this planting. Backing up, we've got some Agapanthus blue yonders, 3 of them, that are forming seed. There are also some absolutely beautiful variegated miscanthus grass, and this is just, the variety is just called variegatus. You know, you might read online that they can take some shade, and they can, but they are one of the first to flop. So really make sure that they get a good amount of sun to keep them from flopping. These are in fact supported with like some chicken wire type cages, and you know, I think that helps to not be too aggressive with the caging, but also keep them from flopping all over the place. As we move this way, you can see my beautiful clump of yellow groove bamboo that gets rhizome pruned twice a year. And you can see that if we go into this clump, you know, I did allow it to run a little bit last year. I wanted to expand the clumps. Really, it's not a lot of work for the amount of beauty that you get. Over here I have a Zounds hosta, which is similar to Sum and Substance, but got a bit of a cooler name in my opinion. I mean, really almost identical. So here's Hosta Zounds, and then there's Sum and Substance. And I mean, this guy is smaller this year because last season we had a drought. And I guess now 2 summers ago, it was really dry, and I don't irrigate a ton. So hostas do have the potential to shrink year to year if they don't get adequate water. This season was very rainy, one of the rainiest on record, so next year it should be okay. So there you guys can get an idea of just how similar Zounds and Sum and Substance are. While we're here, I also wanted to point out this beautiful burgundy glow ajuga, or bugleweed. They do form somewhat of an aggressive ground cover, but absolutely beautiful plants. And then of course, the focal point of this garden are the beautiful pink velvet bananas, or Musa velutina. So this was grown from a seed 2 years ago, and it's done phenomenal this year. Despite kind of the bamboo, as the sun angle lowers, kind of eating the space that the banana's in. That's really what happens with bamboo in the Northeast, is that as the sun angle lowers, the stems tend to lean a little bit more. In this site, anyway. They do prefer a little bit of protection over full sun, though, in my opinion. So now Musa velutina is allegedly hardy to zone 6 if it's mulched properly. So I'm currently debating whether or not I should leave it in the ground and mulch the heck out of it, or play it safe and dig it out and store it in a greenhouse for the winter. Now, it might seem like an obvious decision, but if it has potential to be hardy, I am curious to see how hardy it is. This is a elephant ear called Bikini Teeny, and it's a plant from Brian's Botanicals. Now, what's cool about it is, well, for one, it was a 3-inch pot that I planted in spring, and it's grown a lot. But also, Bikini Teeny is an elephant ear, as most hardy elephant ears do, that runs and forms a clump. So this is basically to be treated as a ground cover, but a taller ground cover. So the other feature about it is when there's a rainstorm, and this one has butted up against the retaining wall too much, so it got ripped up, but the leaves do hold water, and it does kind of dance a little bit. And then pour out when there's too much. Now you can see that there's been water in there for quite a while, because there's actually an algae line on that leaf, which is actually pretty cool. So Bikini Teeny, the fact that it's hardy, or at least semi-hardy to zone 6, is absolutely incredible, because look at the stem color and the beautiful slate bluish green leaves. It's absolutely a gorgeous cultivar for a partially sunny to sunny location. They do like some shade if you're gonna grow them in a hot southern climate. I love this corner of the garden. This year it's just turned out so beautiful, and I can't wait to see where that Bikini Teeny pops up next year. This is another fantastic area of the garden, and of course now we're really in the main tropical garden that that's right off the patio. This is a newly planted banana. I did, it's a little embarrassing to admit, but I did lose a hardy banana, mainly because, well, that pup that you get, this is actually right there, that's the last offshoot from that plant. But I did have to replant this area again because I didn't put up enough winter mulch, and we got pretty cold last winter. About -5 without mulch is more than enough to kill a hardy banana. So keep that in mind. You can see another hardy ground cover taro. This one is Gauligongensis, which is named after a region in China, likely where it was found. Another cool little detail with this garden is this beautiful philodendron salome, which is actually planted in the ground for the summer. No, it is not hardy. Allegedly, there is a variety called philodendron hope, which is smaller, but apparently that's hardy. This plant is not Philodendron Hope though, it's just a regular Salome. So now as we move this way, we're onto the patio. You can see I have a cute little Nandina in a pot. Nandina is a zone 6 plant, and as you guys may know, I'm in a zone 6. So this is a marginally hardy plant. I'm going to test it. I'm not really sure if it'll survive. The only concern I have with the Nandina is less to do with hardiness, but more that it produces berries that are toxic to birds and pets. So just keep that in mind if you do grow Nandina, is that they do have toxic berries. But they are a beautiful evergreen shrub with nice lacy foliage. Of course, one of the nicest areas in the garden is right off the patio. We have my beautiful koi pond. This was newly renovated in spring, and what a transformation between the last pond and this. This is really closely following the principles that you can learn at Aquascape, you know, being, I mean, that's a separate video. And if you guys want to check out a video on how to design ponds like a pro, I actually have that video out on my channel titled just that, how to design and build ponds like a pro, which basically gives you details on how to build an ecosystem style water feature, which is the most low maintenance water feature system in my opinion. Alright, so moving away from the pond, the next plant that's right here is a beautiful Fargesia rufa that got planted summer of 2013. It was a 2-gallon pot, so it's made a decent amount of growth, and you know, Fargesias are one of those, or is particularly Fargesia rufa in the northern end of their range is just one of those plants that grows about like the tortoise. So it's just a slow and steady plant that's going to take quite a long time to get to maturity. But, you know, once it's there, as soon as you start to get size like this, which this plant is about, maybe about 5 feet tall. Now really, Fargesia is not going to look great until it's been in the ground for about 2 years. Now, that's mainly in context of Fargesia rufa, but in the case of many bamboos in that genus, that is the case, that it looks best after it's been planted for a few years, especially after it's outgrown its first few winters. They go through a bit of a slump, you could say. Of course, here, guys, just just check these bananas out. They're unbelievable. They're literally growing up past the eave of the house. I mean, look at that leaf right there. I love these plants. This clump of bananas is 5 years old, and if you look at the base, you can see just exactly what an old Musabastu looks like. So they really spread out, not a ton of suckers. You know, whether it's a sword sucker or a water sprout, doesn't really matter. Pups are pups, and they, in very cold climates, will be what make your plant survive year to year. You know, heavy mulching is always a good idea. But, I mean, come on, guys. This has to be one of my favorite plants. I mean, and the most amazing thing is I planted it out from a 4-inch container 5 years ago in 2014. So, just absolutely incredible. And you know, at the end of the season, they do tend to get that kind of discoloration there. So, you know, I don't think that's anything to worry about. Although, you know, if it is, let me know down in the comments. Generally, it's just an old leaf. I cut it off and turn it into mulch. Got some awesome end-set bananas here. We're near the pond, as you can tell. These guys do have to be dug up, but absolutely beautiful. I mean, this year is definitely one of their best years, and I think one of the reasons for that is that I did take them in before frost, and then I started them early in a greenhouse. Now, if you look up where this enset's growing, it's in quite a bit of shade. So they can take some shade, but they stretch out and you don't get quite as much red. But I'll just show you guys this view of the enset with the autumn leaves collecting in the crevices of the plant. Just absolutely beautiful. And I might as well show you the tropical autumn looking color with the actual autumn color of the ash tree. Love it. Beautiful. Here you guys can also see a better view of the pond. And if you saw my last video where I was describing how the water lilies hamper the flow of leaves into the skimmer, you can see exactly how that happens. Another neat garden is this garden back here at the kind of at the edge of the property line. What's cool about it is, well, I mean, the main two tropical features are the Alocasia elephantier and the Chinese fan palm, both of which are in the ground. Now the Alocasia this year did produce fruit and actually viable seed. That's a Calidora. So its leaves are smaller because it was putting, I'm assuming, the energy into fruit and seed rather than big leaves. So next year, hopefully it doesn't fruit quite so much and I get the big leaves out of it. But, I mean, you know, it's not like they're small, it's just that they're small for an alocasia. So, bit of a size comparison there. And the Japanese forest grasses underneath it are new. The main reason for planting those is, believe it or not, I'm a pretty low input gardener. I don't really like spending a lot of time watering or using like the resources for, you know, basically forcing a plant to be somewhere where it wouldn't naturally work. So Japanese forest grass are plants that really can tolerate this condition well, which basically is high open shade and a slightly drier soil. Whereas before, I had a big mass planting of Impatiens all along the border, and they needed water daily. So I did that last year, and I did it for part of this year, and I had enough. So you can see that there's one left. So I actually have two cultivars in this planting. I have one called Sunflare, and Sunflare is this guy here, which in the spring and it tends to get red tips, or kind of rusty red tips on its new growth. And then the second variety that I have here is called Areola, which is just the typical Japanese forest grass. And the reason I mix them is because from afar it's going to give a slightly different effect. The big shrub that you see there, or what's growing into a big shrub, is a spice bush. That's the scientific name for that is Lindera benzoin. It's a native plant to the northeast, and just a very nice zen jungle type plant that does support some of our native caterpillars. And then if you can distinguish the males from the females, which is very difficult to do without, you know, actually having berries on the plant, then they do produce red berries, almost like a Florida dogwood. Here's a good example too of the bamboos that are young that really don't look all that good. These guys have gone through one winter, and be sure to check out the video about clumping bamboo how-tos in order to get a better idea of clumping bamboo and how they grow. But yeah, basically you can see that they do take some time before they start looking really good. Another thing you might notice, guys, is that I don't pick my leaves up, at least the vast majority of them. This is a bed that really I do very little maintenance to. The main bit of maintenance is digging out the tropicals and, you know, and watering during the season. The bamboos really don't require maintenance, the clumping bamboos. And really the hostas don't need to be cut back in a situation like this. I just let them turn to mush. I might do a little bit of a raking in the spring, but that is the best way, especially with the ground cover. You can see the ajuga really kind of captures the leaf debris. That's a great way, ground covers, to have your soil build itself naturally. Another thing I just have to show you guys that I find absolutely incredible. I mean, I am gonna spotlight my planters, but guys, it's October. We've had some cold nights, but these Impatiens have not missed a beat. And the funny thing is the rest of my Impatiens, now I feel like I might be jinxing them, these guys. The rest of my Impatiens, you know, have gotten chopped up into mulch because, you know, they bit the dust, they died. But these Impatiens here, I mean, they're beautiful, absolutely perfect. And yes, they're close to the house, so, you know, it could be that, but I had another container of Impatiens in my spindle palm, which you guys will see in my houseplant tour later on during the off season, the houseplant tour. I had the spindle palm right there where my areca palm is now. Arecas are a little bit hardier than spindles. And those Impatiens really don't look great, so I cut those back. They're in a palm planter, so they'll regrow, but I just don't know what the heck is going on with them. Just fascinating. Guys, I also wanted to show you the tropical containers on the patio. So we'll get to the Enset banana a little bit later, but this is a little curcuma, scarlet fever. I really treat this plant as a tropical, despite the fact that with proper mulching and a good long hot season that it can overwinter in Zone 6, it doesn't, for me, sprout until July because that's normally when things really heat up. This curcuma has done very well this year, probably the best it's done in years. I guess because of all the rain. Just a beautiful plant. I love the scarlet stems, just as that cultivar name suggests, and that midrib, the center vein that has that color kind of bleed out into the leaf, is just beautiful. I'll insert a picture of what kind of plants I had in the middle of the summer out. It looked really tropical because I have some big palm trees that you guys will see in the houseplant tour. So this is a Pindo palm, which is a cold hardier palm. I would say it's comfortably hardy in Zone 7, and it has done very well this year. It's just absolutely beautiful, and I love the bluish-green leaves. This planter, the clip I recorded, is still going strong. We've had frost, and these Impatiens are still living, so... Guys, I don't know what that means, if the house is leaking heat or something like that, but that is just crazy, and I'm loving every minute of it. These plants here are not as much ornamental planters, but that's that hardy ginger that I got from Plant-A-Light's nursery in the spring. This white feather plant has been a pretty slow grower. I've repotted it into this 2-gallon container. It was in this one with the Impatiens, but I didn't see any growth. So I figured the heat in a small black container is going to help it grow, and it has. This is that white feather ginger that's hardy. Just got some hardy palm trees that are going to, over the years, I'm going to harden off to this area. Got a little monstera that I completely cut back. I actually think that this is a green Borsigiana plant, which is actually really interesting, because you don't see that. You just see the variegated form, so that'd be interesting if it was. And then, of course, the big focal point plant of this patio is this gorgeous potted Enset that I started from a 1-gallon plant later in the summer, too. And it's not in an ornamental container, but just a nursery can. Just an absolutely beautiful plant, which is complemented by a limelight hydrangea shrub that is in a pot for now, going dormant. Nice little, beautiful hardy shrub. Even in Zone 6, you can grow that in a container for a while till it outgrows it. This Tenanthe here took a frost, although it was under multiple eaves of the house, so it saw some 32-degree temperatures, but it didn't get frost on its leaves, which is really good. It's just a Tenanthe laberziana in a nice tropical blue container. That plant has grown quite a lot over the summer. And what's interesting about Tenanthe too is that eventually it grows these like long stems that emerge, and then has these little guys which you can actually cut off, stick in water, and they'll root. And the last container I have to show you guys is this beautiful Borneo King elephantier. Now, this didn't sprout until July, so I left it in a container this year. This is a beautiful plant, beautiful alocasia that does grow big even in a northern climate when it's planted in the ground. It's pretty average looking in a container. And since this is the autumn garden tour, I thought that I'd just take a minute to walk around the garden and show you guys some of the autumn color that's happening right now in the garden. And of course, the video was mainly filmed in early to mid-October, so really in a matter of a few weeks, it's just amazing to see how much the trees and all the plants change. The winter berries you can see are still mostly green, but they do have a yellow autumn color, which complements those berries very nicely. The taros did get a frost, a light one, but so they're cut back and I'll dig them out soon enough. Of course, the river birch has a pretty yellow autumn color, kind of like more of a golden or like a deeper shade of yellow. The redbud's been weird. It hasn't really had autumn color per se. The leaves kind of just fall off, which in some sense it kind of sucks, but you know, they do generally get a nice yellow, more of a golden autumn color, so it contrasts the birch pretty nicely. Here you can see some of the summer sweets getting their yellow autumn color near the koi pond. Of course, the bamboos don't really get an autumn color because they're evergreen. And then just to contrast that, I know the grass is a bit in the way, but just to contrast that spice bush yellow, which is more of a lemon yellow, to the yellows of the river birch and the redbud, I try to have more yellow colors than anything, because then when you have something like a serviceberry here, it's gonna really pop out even more. If you guys want to see more videos like this, be sure to join the Barefoot Nation and hit that subscribe button and tap the bell, and drop a like if you liked it. And I want to hear from you guys, so leave a comment down below. What'd you think? What was your favorite plant? I mean, come on. Like, thanks for watching, y'all. I can't wait to see you on the next one.